Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the best part of the week. We're on Gingerly. We are live. This is Purplesoy22 coming at you with my good buddy Style Pigeon, GM, GA, GE to all of our friends across the world. What's up, Pigeon? Happy Sunday, my dude. What you been working on?
I have been not working on a whole lot because actually one of our friends is in town. Um,
Yay, Bluebird
yeah,
app friends.
yeah, I had a random Bluebird app, well, not random, but good Bluebird app friend just dropped by the house this weekend, so we've been hanging out. And I got to say, it's really weird because it's one of those moments where you're like, "Gosh, I wish we were podcasting." Even though if we were podcasting, it wouldn't be the same, right? But we've just been having really good conversations, and I've never been more bullish on art and creativity and that sort of stuff driving life forward in a way that um, a lot of people don't get the opportunity to experience. And
Yeah,
I'm
man.
really excited, and I'm happy to be here because we get to be talking about the future today, and we're going to do a little bit of like prediction. Basically, it's going to be how it works a little bit. We'll see what happens.
Looking
We're
into the crystal ball, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. We're looking into the crystal ball that may or may not tell us the truth.
Yep.
So hang in with us. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to do some speculation and some dreaming, even. And yeah, it's super cool. So do you want to go ahead and give us our shout out for?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as always, Gingerly is sponsored by our good friends at Roundly X. Roundly X is a super easy to use dollar cost averaging app. Basically, you connect it to your favorite exchange and you get to round up your everyday purchases into Bitcoin and other crypto. If you sign up with the code Gingerly, which is the name of this fantabulous show that you're watching, you'll get $15 in Bitcoin after your first roundup if you're in the US. And if you're outside of the US, you can sign up for Idea Bumps because that's an international thing and get your $15 in Bitcoin. Check them out. You can track any type of financial asset in a portfolio tracker, and it's a really easy way to save sound money while you're spending. So, big thanks to Roundly X for making sure that we have awesome art and we get to do this show regularly. So yeah, let's dive in. Like you were saying, Pigeon, we're talking about the future of blockchain, crypto, Web3, what comes next, kind of thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's
So
kick it off.
big thanks to Roundly X. Thanks for doing that for me, real quick, John. But let's dive in. I'm super stoked about this. So the episode title: The Evolution of Blockchain Technology. What comes next? I love doing this, like peering into the future, especially with people such as yourself who are perfectly competent. And I like hearing where you guys think the world's going and whatnot. Like I said, this weekend I've been doing that with VR and creativity and art and everything. And so now I want to take some time publicly to do that with Bitcoin. So
Yeah.
let's do a give me a quick overview of where you see blockchain technology and Web3 as it stands right now. What are the big things that it brings to the world right now? And what are some of the downsides to the technology overall as it stands?
Cool. That's a very broad question, but I'll do
I
my
know it's
best
broad, but just give me
as much as I
we're
can.
doing glossaries, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
we're just doing a glossing.
So I think to start with, it's important to be reminded that even though crypto and blockchain has been in the news a lot, that we're still so early. I would think less than 2% of adoption has happened to what we want it to be. So just keep that in mind while we're having this conversation. We're super, super, super early, like it is with VR, and
Mhm.
other technologies. It's kind of a novelty. But that being said, I think the biggest thing that it brings to the table currently is an option to opt out of the current financial system. Um, a lot of people know groceries are expensive, shrinkflation is happening. We're not making as much money as to keep up with all of that stuff. And there's a reason. People may not understand the reason, but it's because the way that the financial system is currently designed. And all you really need to know is that there is an alternative, and that's Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And the main reason it's an alternative is because the people that are in office don't control it. And so if you
Mhm.
don't think that the way that things are going right now is optimal, which I think probably most people would say that, there's an alternative. And I think that at the very base of things um, is probably the biggest thing to consider. Like there's an option outside
Okay.
of what we're currently experiencing.
So I completely agree with that. And I also think that there's another element to it here as far as the thing that I see blockchain technology bringing to the world, and that's specifically Web3 as a concept, right?
Mhm.
So we move through Web 1 as a concept, Web 2 as a concept, which is read only, and then read and write. And now we're getting to read, write, and own, essentially, would be the definition of Web 3. So just to kind of gingerly give us an intro to that, those are the two big things from our perspective that blockchain technology has brought to the world. Blockchain technology is not actually all that particularly new, right?
No, no,
Um,
it's not.
it's been around for quite some time. It's just based on cryptography, and then that's applied to this new technology called blockchain, right?
Yeah.
And we're only now just fleshing out what's going on with that. So that's why we like to do. That's part of why we like to do these extravagant, like dream on sort of conversations.
Dream on. Yeah.
What can we do with this? Like, there's all sorts of things that haven't even been thought of yet that this technology can bring to the planet. So
Yeah.
that's where we stand right now. So with those technological advancements, there are certain solution oriented things that I think are going to be able to come down the pipeline. So where we're at right now with blockchain and technology, uh, one of the big issues with it is scalability. Okay. And this is something that we've kind of been seeing a little bit with the ordinals phenomenon,
Mm,
if you want to call
true.
it a phenomenon, is we think this tech is awesome. We're ready to dive in, but then we dive in so hard that it makes it overly expensive. And especially artists like myself, I don't make money off of my art really. I just do the art for people and for myself, and that's how it is. Um, so it cannot cost me money in a significant way for me to keep doing that, right? So that's a big issue with that. What does it look like going forward? How does that get solved? What does that look like in the future from your perspective, being a person who's been around for forever? And what does that timeline look like if you can give us that?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. And I think a little bit of a history lesson is important here, because if you haven't been in the space since 2017 or earlier, you may not know that the scalability conversation has been going on for quite some time now. Back in the day, there was a thing called the block wars. Okay, and it sounds like this big thing, like Star Wars or something like that. But basically, it was a bunch of nerds arguing that Bitcoin couldn't process enough transactions to be able to be a competitor with someone like Visa. And so we want to make the block size dramatically larger. And the crux of the argument was on one side, okay, we want Bitcoin to be the settlement layer that's going to be payments for everything. And so we have to make this block size larger. The opposing argument, which ended up winning, was that, okay, maybe you're right, but like we can't just allow people to upgrade the Bitcoin blockchain willy nilly.
Hmm.
And the required control that we were going to have to give up to this group of people to make these upgrades was something that's like we can't guarantee that this group of individuals is going to represent the good of the entire world with their decisions, basically. And so the block wars ended with Bitcoin Cash and then later Bitcoin Satoshi's vision forking off of the original Bitcoin to try and make their own competitor Bitcoin that had larger block size and would, supposedly be the solution to the problems that you're describing around expensive transactions with lots of people trying to use the space all at once. As it turns out, both Bitcoin Cash and BSV died terrible deaths. Like they're trading 90 to 99% lower than they were when the block wars started now.
Mm.
So it seems like the original Bitcoin won that argument. Scarcity has more value than maybe we originally thought. And maybe Bitcoin isn't actually meant to be the global settlement layer for everything, like for going out and buying a coffee, for instance.
Right. Okay.
So,
So what? Okay. So that's the history lesson, right?
yes.
I'm sorry, I
Yep.
might have just interrupted you really
No,
badly.
no, no. It's all good.
That's the history lesson. Given that this conversation has been going on for a little while, what do we think the solutions are moving forward? I mean, let's get to the future part, because I think that, so we've been talking about like the Stacks network, right? The Stacks
Yeah.
as
We talk
a
about stacks a
chain,
lot. Yeah.
um, and because we really like that idea of a layer two for Bitcoin, um, because it offers some potentiality there. But then we also kind of complain sometimes that the Stacks network is a little slow for what we'd like to use it for. Um, can you run down those two issues a little bit for me and show
Sure.
me what maybe that looks like going, like what does an optimal Stacks environment look like? What does an optimal Lightning Network environment look like?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's basically I mean, if you want to narrow it down to two schools of thought, one is just the Bitcoin purist angle, which, I have my problems with Bitcoin maximalists, but that's for a different conversation. So if you want to stay pure to Bitcoin, we'll talk about Lightning, but since we're looking at the Stacks website right now, I'll start with them. So the idea is a layer 2, which you referenced just a second ago, which means something built on top of the Bitcoin network. Basically, Stacks' idea is that we know that Bitcoin is going to confirm a block every 10 minutes. And so that being said, what if we use the Bitcoin block confirmation as a consensus mechanism for a layer 2 network, which basically just means Bitcoin block confirmations are constant. We know that. So we're going to build our own confirmations based off of that type of confirmation. And it's a different blockchain. It's built on top of Bitcoin, and it relies on Bitcoin to get transactions done. That's a problem, like you say, because transactions then have to confirm every 10 to 15 minutes because it's based off the Bitcoin blockchain. So then speed and operability are still a problem. While you may have smart contracts, which just means if this function happens, then we'll do these other functions. That's good, but it still takes 10 minutes. So Stacks had that problem, and that really was kind of brought about and made obvious when ordinals hit, right? Because ordinals were NFTs kind of built natively on the Bitcoin blockchain instead of built on top of it in the Stacks layer. Stacks is actively working on this. So if you haven't done any research, I'll give you a chance to DYOR here, but look into the Nakamoto protocol for Stacks. It's basically an upgrade that allows near instant settlement and very cheap settlement on Stacks using what I understand is called a subnet, which is they're confirming things and they only put in batches of transactions into the 10-minute blocks that you as a user won't notice. Everything will get confirmed on top of it. It's still being confirmed for the 10-minute Bitcoin blocks underneath. So it's still secure. It's still built on Bitcoin, but it gives us that immediacy that a lot of us want in the Web3 space to accomplish things like buying a coffee or buying a game skin, for instance, where you want that to settle instantly. Whereas like if you're moving around savings, maybe you've got $1,000 in savings and, you're fine with it taking, 15, 20 minutes or an hour if you want to pay less. That's the cool thing about Bitcoin right now is that you can tell the Bitcoin blockchain how much you prioritize things. So if you're like, I don't really want to spend a ton of money moving this money, I'll just pay a couple satoshis, which are like a fraction of a cent. Maybe it'll take up to 24 hours to confirm, but I don't need that transaction to settle right this second, so I don't care. For other things, we use layer 2s, and then we use Lightning as well. If you
Okay,
want to stick to Bitcoin.
so this brings me to one of the major advantages that I see in the future as a rookie. Really, this brings me to our decentralized control over the financial systems that we use. Right. So, like if I go to a restaurant or something, let's say I walk in, I order my food and everything, and I swipe my card, and that starts my transaction. Right? They
Right.
serve me my food and everything. I sit down and I eat and whatnot. And if that transaction takes the whole time I'm eating to confirm, no big deal. And maybe I just, instead of the restaurant having to pay $2 to transact that one bit through the credit card company, which is, that's not an abnormal fee for credit card transactions. Instead of that happening, they go, well, we don't want to pay more than 20 cents per credit card transaction, but it may take 30 minutes to confirm.
Right.
I was like, okay, cool. Now it's not someone else at the bank that's controlling my financials. Right. It's me. I'm saying I'm willing to pay this much for the convenience, or I'm not willing to pay any more than this for this degree of convenience. And that's a whole new level of finance.
Yeah, exactly right. It gives a level of control that we don't typically see. So I saw a tweet. This it's a small side tangent, but I saw a tweet from I believe it was Altcoin Daily the other day, and they just asked the question, "Why don't people adopt Bitcoin?" Straight up, and I was like, "That's a good question." My answer was they don't understand how their own money works, and the credit card thing is a great example. You might think that whenever you're at a restaurant and you swipe your credit card, that payment is settled right then. Au contraire, my friend, most of the time it takes up to a month for those credit card transactions to actually settle because there's so many different layers and so many different middlemen that are taking a cut. So the restaurant has to like get their payment, right? But then the credit card company has to get their 3% cut. The routing company that handles the transactions for that company typically gets a cut. And then the bank at the end of the day that's holding the money either for you or for the restaurant gets a cut. And oftentimes those aren't settled anywhere close to instantly. It's just the illusion, right? And so like you're saying, using something like Bitcoin moves that control over to the person that's receiving the money, right? You can say, like you said, I don't want to pay fees on this. I want to get as much margin as I possibly can. I'm okay with my transaction settling even in 24 hours because we know that the Bitcoin blockchain is going to be consistent enough to just continue delivering our payments. You don't have to trust a company to continue doing that. And you don't have to pay a company 3% to process all those transactions. So,
right. Which, to stay gingerly, is why we like the term peer-to-peer, right? It's not a transaction between us and then there's like a parent who's going, okay, well, let me make sure this money gets transferred then. It's just me and John. We don't have to even trust each other because it's backed up on the blockchain. Trustless peer-to-peer transactions. That's a buzzword that, especially if you're new to Bitcoin and crypto, you'll hear that stuff a lot. And this is kind of why it's important. So if you want to rewind this episode or rewatch it later, highly recommend getting that section again from John, because he just explained something that's completely game-changing at the end of the day for the way that we transact all of the time, like with these simple restaurant transactions. So that's part of what the big future of Bitcoin looks like, right? Is if we bring this peer-to-peer electronic cash system online, all of a sudden this reshapes the way that we transact, and your gas doesn't cost extra because of the fact that there has to be, I'm sure everybody goes to the gas station, they're like, debit card is cheaper than a credit card.
Everyone
Why
does
is that? It's because of bullshit fees that happen after the fact, right? It has nothing to do with anything relevant to you or the people selling you the gas. Okay. It's just all of the nonsense middlemen. So, okay, we've got that picture going, I think, pretty well. What does cross-chain communication and interoperability bring to the table as far as this tech progresses? All of a sudden we have standardization protocols and things that we can start to mingle together, just like everybody loves the convenience of, say, the Google suite, right? Being able to jump on and do docs and Excel spreadsheets. Well, sorry, not Excel spreadsheets, but sheets.
Google Sheets.
Yeah, Google Sheets. Sorry for branding issues. I can't believe they even get away with that much.
Yeah.
But they're Google. Who's gonna? You can just sue Google. Come on.
Yeah.
I just scared myself. Sorry, Google. I'm just joking.
Yeah.
I know you're listening. But okay, so what does all this add as far as convenience, as far as interoperability, being able to? What does that mean for us on a pragmatic level?
Yeah. So we just talked about the fact that your current financial system has tons of middlemen in. It makes a lot of sense if you're like, okay, we take all those guys out. It's just between me and you. Now we're saving a lot of money. That seems like a no-brainer. The next step in interoperability that I've come to realize, especially working at NeoSwap, is that you don't have to use Bitcoin for everything. And I know that I might just have offended the absolute hell out of some people listening. But believe it or not, the world continues to turn if you don't use Bitcoin for everything. I'm more of a Solana proponent these days, and I used to not be because of the centralization that was a part of it. But it took my boss telling me at NeoSwap, look, man, like centralization isn't always a bad thing. Do you think that having centralized servers for, like your Borderlands game that you play is a bad thing? I'm like, well, no, why should Borderlands have to be built on Bitcoin? So that being said, what if we could use blockchain technology that takes the middleman out, typically, that maybe is more centralized, but now we can have more direct ownership over our game skins, for instance. Like right now, you don't own your game skins. Steam owns those, or Fortnite, or whoever. But the interoperability part gives us more control, even though, and the way that crypto works in general, there's so many opportunities to switch one cryptocurrency for another. And depending on what your focus is, whether that's gaming or investing or saving, or gaining a yield, or even running a company, if a decentralized autonomous organization, which is just a big word for a company that you run that allows stakeholders to vote for things that you do, all of that's possible in blockchain. And I think that The future is cross-chain. There's not going to be one chain that rules them all, to use a Lord of the Rings quote. And if we get to that point, y'all should be worried, because that means that it's a CBDC and the government's probably controlling it. And that's bad.
Yeah, that's really bad. So, okay. I really like where we've gone with interoperability. And I was thinking it almost, to your point about centralization versus decentralization with the Solana chain in particular, it's almost just like it's still a peer-to-peer trustless electronic cash system. It's just that the peers are no longer me and you. The peers are me and this gaming company.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but it's still like kind of trustless to some extent. It's just we have one middleman, but that middleman is required for it to be trustless between the peers.
Right.
If that makes sense. So like if somebody could say, hey, Activision, you can't focus 30 hours of your 40-hour a week on monetization of cosmetics. You have to split it at least half. Like it has to at least be 50-50 cosmetics and actual important fun game quality. Like if you had a middleman who could tell Activision that, then Diablo 4 wouldn't suck. So there you go.
Yeah, totally. And I think a big point that we need to make here, especially for beginners, is that the word trustless is not absolute. It's a sliding scale. And that's not bad, okay? Because certain situations may dictate certain levels of trust that you need to place in various institutions or functions. And so for Bitcoin, the whole goal is you don't have to trust anything but math. If math is constant, if electricity continues to work, Bitcoin's going to work. You don't have to trust. So that's trustless. I agree with you that Solana and other various like more centralized chains are also built to be trustless, but it's more of a sliding scale compared to Bitcoin. And that's not a bad thing.
I completely agree. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm getting distracted because Nick is in the background wanting to talk about Baldur's Gate right now. We'll talk more about that later, Nick. But I can't wait to hear your experience. We've been actually talking a lot about RPGs and how they relate to life, and like all of blockchain technology and everything, right? Because it's like we call them MacGuffins in questing, right? Like you have to go find a MacGuffin, and I think that that's the way that this is becoming in technology and like seeking careers in tech is you kind of have to go get like, okay, now I know about Bitcoin. Like I have that MacGuffin under my wing and okay, let me go get this skill. I know how to work with Sparrow Wallet specifically. Like, okay, cool. I've got that MacGuffin. And now I'm actually ready for like to start the main quest. So I've got a short section here. I think this should be a short section. What are the advantages of the adoption of central bank digital currencies? What are the benefits?
Absolute and total control over your citizenry.
So none. Awesome. We're done with that section. Moving on to decentralized finance. What are the decentralized finance advantages if we take the government out of this picture altogether? And Nick makes a great point. Fast transaction speed is an advantage to CBDC. Are CBDCs faster at transacting than, say, like a layer 2 chain?
Maybe not. I mean, most likely the CBDC is going to be built on a blockchain unless governments take the time to build their own blockchains. But I mean, if they do that, it's going to take hundreds of years for them to get anything rolled out. So maybe we should hope that they try and build on their own blockchain for
fingers crossed.
Yeah.
We've got a brand new blockchain coming out in 2130.
But okay, so I will point out that we are obviously anti-CBDC because of the control that it gives governments. And in my opinion, governments are just people, and why should other people be controlling what I spend my money on? But the narrative for CBDCs will be convenience. Make no doubt about it. Everyone's going to come to you and say, this is going to be the easiest way. Like you'll have your identity, you'll have your driver's license, you'll have all your money in one place. It'll be a simple to use app. You can just scan your QR code wherever, or maybe just use facial recognition at the store. Don't even have to worry about swiping a credit card. Like it's all going to be connected. It's going to be so easy to use, blah, 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 all of this stuff. But at the end of the day, convenience will be traded for your personal security and being allowed to do stuff. If you're concerned about the government making you eat bugs because of climate change, they can force you to eat what they want if you're using a CBDC. Because, I mean, use PayPal's recent stablecoin as an example. PayPal can freeze and revoke and shut down any account that their stablecoin has at a drop of a hat for no reason whatsoever. You think government's going to like be perfectly pure and not exercise those types of powers over you? I think the pandemic shows absolutely not. So be careful
Yeah.
with CBDC and
I,
convenience.
we see it even in the idea of the unbanked, right? We talk about banking the unbanked. Why are the unbanked unbanked? It's because someone's not allowing them to be banked.
Yeah,
It's not
that's
hard
true.
to set up a bank account. Like you can set up a bank account. So
Yep.
if and they should be happy to set up a bank account for you if we assume that they were going to make money off of you. The
Right.
reason that they're not banking you is because you're not profitable to them. And
That's
if you're not
correct.
profitable to them, then you get thrown in the garbage. That's
Yep.
how it works, right? Like I don't
Yeah.
make the rules. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
So, you know, we don't think that's right. We think everybody should be able to purchase things.
Yeah.
Is that
As a
is that an
basic
extreme
good.
idea?
Yeah.
Why does that sound so sketchy when I say it? Like I sound like a crazy person in my head when I'm like, yeah, like I think you should be able to exchange goods.
Yeah.
That seems
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
pretty base level assumption for a civilized society to me.
Yeah.
So
As a
yeah,
very
we're
brief
very anti
anecdote
CBDC.
here. Yeah, as a very brief anecdote, there was a viral video that was going around this past week of a lady in China who was basically like she wasn't allowed to transact because of something she posted on social media. Like her centralized social and bank account was shut down because of something she posted. And so her cousin tried to set up an account for her so that she could buy groceries. She wasn't allowed to buy groceries because of something that she posted on social media. Her cousin set up an account for her, but when she went to go check out at the grocery store, the facial recognition scan that she has to do to be able to pay wouldn't work because her cousin set the account up for her. Right. So this is the level of like, oh crap, we're in deep water that we could get to if we go down a CBDC. China is a great example of that.
Yeah.
It's just as simple as buying groceries. And she's not like some extremist, like who even knows. Yeah, there you go. That's the video I'm talking about. Thank you, Nick. Good job. I'm blown away. Definitely watch this video. I mean, if you want to understand where we're going, it's this if we don't come up with systems like Bitcoin to take its place.
Yeah, there has to be an alternative.
And so that's the DeFi that we were talking about. We kind of spent a little more time on the CBDC than you originally wanted to. But so the benefits of decentralized finance is that, so yeah, it takes out all of the middlemen, but then at the same time, it gives us access to things that we're not allowed to have access to right now. So if you want to get really good investments in Wall Street, you have to become an accredited investor.
Right.
And guess what? It costs at least $250,000 to become an accredited investor.
Oh, and just as a reminder on the CBD stuff, the reason that you have to become an accredited investor in order to invest and make good deals and actually profit in the markets is because of the fact that they want to protect you. Yeah, don't forget, that's what they always say. Anybody who trades a little bit of freedom for a little bit of security deserves neither and will lose both.
Yeah, great quote. And also all of this protection nonsense, it just sounds like the mafia from the old days. I mean, and it is. It's funny because I feel like when we were growing up, Pidge and I are both in our 30s. And so when we were growing up in the 90s, it was very much of like a conspiracy thing that the government wants to control us and like, but now after the pandemic, they don't even try and pretend like that's not the case. They're just out here like, yes, we want a CBDC. Yes, we want to be able to tell people what they can and can't buy. And so to get out of that, we have to have an alternative. And thank goodness there's blockchain and Web3. Now, it is the Wild West out there. So a lot of the narrative that the government uses is, oh, we need to protect the little investors. But what it really is they don't want the little guy to be able to make money outside of their controlled system. Because if you have independent thinkers that can have, heaven forbid, enough resources to be able to do things on their own, then that's enough to threaten the stability of the people in power.
Yes, destabilizing is the issue.
Yeah.
But destabilization leads to growth, and there are going to be growing pains as well. And that's one of the things that, as we talk about some of the benefits of decentralized financing or finance, it should be a verb. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be a verb. You can do finance, right? Um, and that's really the game that they've been playing and gatekeeping for a long time is let's move around money and make these like profit margins here, 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 and here. By the time the money comes back to me, I'm making X percentage. And I know that I'm making X percentage because I'm controlling this thing on the back end. It's like,
Right.
okay, well, the game's rigged. We want an unrigged game that's as fair as possible to play.
Right.
Um, that doesn't mean that there won't still be losers, right?
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
if you stay in bed all day and don't do shit, you're going to end up being a loser. That's just the way it works. It sucks, but
Yeah.
that's just natural law. Like grasshoppers get eaten by ants. Tough luck. Look out for ants. That's I
Right.
don't know what to tell you,
Yeah.
stupid grasshoppers. So along with that comes enhanced security and privacy.
Hmm.
And these two things are very interlinked in my head as I learn more and more from you and from Cal and from other people in the industry. These things are integrally connected because the freedom that allows for us to play our own fair game and try to win also allows for openings in our security
Hmm.
because like sim swapping is a thing, like things have happened to you in the past where it's like, okay, now I see this gap in my security now. I'm constantly trying to learn from you about security and things. You probably like, I'm really tired of telling you this over and over and over again because you never write it down. Um,
It's not even you, man. Like a good buddy of mine I used to work with. I mean, a couple days ago, I messaged him and I was like, "Have you set up that cold storage yet?" And he'd be like, "No," and I'd be like, "Oh my god, it's set up the cold storage now," And I don't know. It's my
yeah,
duty in life to be that person.
yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have many assets for anybody to take. Just FYI, so that's awesome. It's great to be poor. And so, what are the like technological advantages, though? How do we balance this freedom with security from a technical standpoint? Because there are companies out there who are doing a pretty darn good job of this, in my opinion. People like Xverse, like there was a loophole issue that they had fairly recently, and they fixed it like that. Like they were
Yeah,
really on it. I was actually because at first I was like, I heard the bad news about this and the way that people were spinning it. I was like, oh my god, like I might have been trusting Xverse when I should not have been trusting this company. And it
yeah,
turns out they were on it. They were right there. They fixed it almost immediately. And it was like the second tweet that I saw was them being like, "Oh no, we're good."
yeah.
So where are we at with that in the future?
Yeah. So I think first of all, I want to back up and make one quick point that
Hmm.
I don't think that I would have had to make even a couple years back. But privacy is not a bad thing. Okay, privacy is not a bad thing. You don't have to be hiding something to want to not have everyone know what you're doing with your own money. In my opinion, it's a base, and I don't even know if it's just my opinion. I think that there's probably natural law to back this up. But you have a right to be able to use the money that you earn how you want to use it, even if it's illicit things. Like you have the right to make that decision. It's not somebody else's decision. And so that's part of why I care so much about Bitcoin is because it gives control over how, like, who can see my money and who can see what I can do. And it's my responsibility, right? Basically, our society has pushed that responsibility to banks and to credit companies who have abandoned you and have sold all of your personal information to consumers for the highest bid. So I just want to make that really clear. I don't think enough people say that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so yeah, Nick makes a good point in the chat here. It's not just about privacy; it's about control of the money, separation of money and state. That's very important, and that's a huge part. Like that's the other side of the CBDC, right? The CBDC is we're going to give you utmost convenience, but we're going to take all of the control away from you. And the Bitcoin side says no, like the individual is responsible for their own money. And the bad side of that is that people aren't responsible. We've
Yep.
been so used to not being responsible and not controlling our own money for so long that you know you realize how many people you trust to take care of your stuff for you on a daily basis. You trust a credit card company, you trust the bank that your money will be there when you want it to be. You trust the actual value of the physical thing that you call dollars in your wallet. And I don't think you should trust any of those. And so it's, again, going back to trust, it's a sliding scale. So like you with Xverse, you realized after that hack happened how much trust you had been placing in Xverse, and it
Right.
caused you to reanalyze that situation. And at the end of the day, you came out and you're like, okay, well, actually, though, the way that they handled that situation, I'm still good to trust them. And that's
Right.
cool. And that's something that you, Pigeon, have to make the decision for. And you, the viewer, have to think, okay, I'm trusting this list of people. I'm not comfortable with these two. So we're going to make some different decisions. But even me, like, so I don't like trusting the exchanges. So I don't hold any of my cryptocurrency on exchanges because, geez, if you looked at the last year in cryptocurrency history, so many companies went bankrupt and lost all their money. I mean, and I lost some money doing that, right? And so it just reaffirms to me, no, I want to hold my own keys. I'm not going to trust them to anybody else. But that's different for every single person. And so I would just encourage you, try and sit down and make a list of all of the people that you're trusting with your money and be as exhaustive as possible. And then start doing some research and feel and say, should I be trusting JP Morgan? You know,
Yeah.
should I be trusting Xverse? And then make decisions off of that.
Yeah, and then we tie this into politics too, because and that's the separation of money and state, right? Because the question is, who is sovereign is actually the word. Who is sovereign in a given situation? Are you sovereign over yourself? That's what we call individual sovereignty, which is actually the basis of Western civilization and democracy is individual sovereignty. You're your own little kingdom. You have to run your shit. And if we all do that to the best of our ability, what happens is we flourish and everything's awesome. Okay. These are basic principles that we've discovered over the years, over the centuries. Millions of people have died in order to discover this for us. Okay. Don't waste their sacrifices by forgetting the lessons that they taught us. It turns out that giving the government control over everything is a really bad plan.
And we have
Every time that
historical
we've done it,
precedent for that.
every time we've done it, millions of people have died.
Yeah.
Okay. That's and right now, the federal government thinks let them eat cake. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going, well,
Or
yeah,
bugs.
inflation's bad, but what about your investments? Like you can liquidate a little bit, right? You'll be fine. And they don't give a shit that the fact that they say liquidate, we go, yeah, like we need water. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
The mass majority of people don't even understand how the markets work. So that's the situation we're in. And that's why we're talking about this, because the future is actually bright. The future is
Yeah.
actually bright. We're not pessimistic about what the future looks like. We just understand that there's work to be done in order to make it to the future that we want.
Right.
Okay, so same thing with artificial intelligence, right? This is kind of expanding out, but if you're into crypto, you'll hear about artificial intelligence. So I believe that you're smart enough to hear this. With AI, it's we have to navigate this responsibly. We don't need to turn the switch off. LLMs, large language models like ChatGPT, are not going to take over the world. Okay, they're not sentient. Just do some reading and understand how they work, and you'll realize that your car isn't sentient in the same way that a large language model isn't sentient. It's complicated.
Yeah. That's a great
I can't
comparison.
construct the car completely from the ground up. I don't know fully how every single thing works down to the material science that goes into the engine, but I also know that it's not sentient. It's a machine, and I give it inputs, it gives me outputs, and that's the way that it works. So anyways, that relates to crypto because of the fact that this is technology that seems spooky sometimes because it's a really deep rabbit hole, but it is actually going to result in a really positive future, I think.
Yeah.
And privacy and security is a big part of that. So in my notes here, I've got some really interesting things that I don't understand. So we're gonna skip that shit.
I think the quantum stuff.
Yeah. Tell me about
So
this.
I just want to give a quick shout out for this because I feel like if most people who are beginning and they look up the risks of cryptocurrency, they're going to hear two things: EMPs and quantum computing. And I can't help but laugh
Oh yeah,
just hearing those two things because people are like, well, if we get and AI to some degree, yeah, Nick is right, but less so. Anyway, so quantum computing is like, well, what if we get a computer that can perfectly hack all of these systems and basically it's powerful enough to equate to like time travel. I'm not a quantum expert, but I'm telling you that if we get to the point where quantum computing is going to be a threat to Bitcoin, Bitcoin is either going to evolve or a system is going to come up that's going to be able to resist and flourish under those particular circumstances. That's the way that Bitcoin has always operated. That's the way humanity has always operated. And I think that we'll have much larger problems than is Bitcoin going to work if there's a computer out there that is powerful enough to break the system. That's one. Two, EMPs. People are like, well, what if electricity doesn't exist? And what if the internet doesn't exist? And then what's your Bitcoin going to do? My response is pretty much the same. If the internet and all electricity go down, we're screwed. You're not going to be worried about whether or not you can move your Bitcoin. And as a side note, Bitcoin has evolved enough to be able to be transacted on Bluetooth and radio waves. So I think that there is actually a possibility that Bitcoin could work on solar power without having to have the internet and electricity in the way that we think about it. So yeah, there are some crazy high level. It's like, that's like saying, okay, well, I'm not going to invest in gold because, you know, an asteroid is going to hit the earth in 100 years anyway. So
that's exactly the argument. That's exactly the argument, because it's like, okay, well, what if the apocalypse? And it's like, yeah, okay, what if zombies too? Like,
yeah,
fuck, I don't know what else to do. Like, stop going to work. Okay. Like if an asteroid's going to hit the earth, you don't need a paycheck. You'll be fine.
Go party it up
until the world ends. Yeah. Like,
yeah.
Come on. What are we talking about here?
So anyway, I think you're
also,
right.
Like, what about your central bank? What about your central bank? Are they going to be okay if the power grid goes down? No.
Oh, totally. Yeah. No.
So everybody's going to be screwed. That's a stupid argument. And I actually, to be honest, I kind of get sick of hearing it. Like, okay, we really need to get to the point where people have done enough and listened enough genuinely to the arguments around finance to stop making stupid arguments. Like even the environmental concessions that people want to make around blockchain. Well, isn't Bitcoin going to boil the oceans because everybody's got a stack of GPUs in their basement? One, everybody has a stack of GPUs in their house already. We just use them really inefficiently to do stupid stuff like type up your grocery list. Okay. You're still running your GPU. You're still absorbing a ton of power. Bitcoin doesn't like suddenly shut down the whole grid. Also, by the way, if people would start accessing grid solutions that made more sense and stop being idiots around what's green and what's not, then we could actually do this in a green way, right? Like if we just use nuclear power, nuclear is the option, right? But everybody's spooked because they won't read. It's you people out there who won't freaking read who are slowing everything down. Okay, stop it. Okay,
go do some research.
Yeah, just do what we have to do. Yes, I know it sucks to get your. Okay, sorry, I'm getting a little ranty. I know it sucks to get up off the couch and do something other than watch TV. I know that it sucks because I don't like to do it either. Okay, it sucks. I want to sit and be a tub of lard cognitively and not do any of this. Okay, but I can't, right? Because the storm's coming. Like it or not, the storm's coming. It's gonna start raining, and it's up to you to build your ark. We're telling you that the future is going to be blockchain because that's what we believe. You don't have to trust us. Don't trust us. Go look it up. Go read the stuff that we're talking about. If it looks like bullshit to you, that's fine. But you're not going to be able to argue against it based on green stuff. Run down the green environmental concerns for us real quick, John.
Yeah. So the big one is, we need to move away from proof of work and move to proof of stake because, like you said, proof of work is going to boil the oceans. First of all, I feel like if someone is going to use intense fear mongering like that, there's probably a reason that they're trying to make you so scared. And that reason is governments cannot control proof of work, period. They can't, especially Bitcoin's proof of work, because it's all of these people using their GPUs collectively for something extremely beneficial to the betterment of humanity, which is Bitcoin. So if there's fear like that, just start asking why. Why is that the case? But so the big, in my opinion, like it's just fear mongering, and it's because Bitcoin can actually be a green solution that people are so scared of it. So the go-to story for me is that I lived in Austin, Texas for 3 years. And while I was there, so Texas has a notoriously bad electricity grid. But while I was there, Texas also committed to being one of the largest Bitcoin mining states in the United States. And I actually saw the benefit of that throughout my 3 years. The first year that I was in Texas, that big deep freeze happened where like the grid completely shut off because of a fluke blizzard that came through. And the Bitcoin miners were just getting started being established. And so it wasn't really much of a narrative at that time. But everyone was like, wow, the Texas grid is screwed. Like it's obvious that this legacy system doesn't work. The next 2 years, we had a similar blizzard where we weren't as affected because Bitcoin miners were there. Basically, the way that the grid worked is that the grid gets used to the particular load. And then whenever there's a spike, say for winter, the Bitcoin miners can actually like scale back their activity to provide this excess energy that the grid's not used to having to be able to support the spike. And then whenever there's not as much demand, the Bitcoin miners ramp back up to be able to provide a stability to the grid that wasn't there before. So instead of having this big up and down where the grid would break constantly, the Bitcoin miners provided the stability and then even provided excess. So they're using the grid efficiently and they're saving it when it would break otherwise. And so like that's just a very simple example of how Bitcoin mining proof of work is making our electricity much more efficient and much more beneficial to citizenry, as opposed to the narrative of like, oh, we're boiling the oceans. It's the opposite.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of these Bitcoin miners, like Shell and like the gas company, they're one of the biggest Bitcoin miners in the South. Yeah, flaring is exactly what I was just about to get to, Nick. They have figured out that all of this energy that they were wasting with gas production, it basically produces methane, which they weren't able to use, and we're wasting all of this energy. They figured out that they can actually take that waste that was going into the environment and use that as fuel to mine Bitcoin. So now not only are we wasting less, we're turning waste into one of the most valuable assets on earth. And so it's like, it's a net positive. It's crazy. It's literally the exact opposite of what people say about Bitcoin.
Right. And why are they able to get away with this fear mongering? The lack of education, which is why
That's
you
right.
should watch our podcast every 2
That's
weeks on
right.
Sunday at noon. Gingerly, tune in, follow at Salad Pigeon on Twitter, follow at PurpleSway22 on Twitter. All right.
And while we're pitching that, I would just mention that we have done several episodes about Bitcoin being green. So go back in our first, like, I think it's episode 4 or 5. We cover it in depth. We do a full deep dive, an hour into why Bitcoin is actually a green solution. So I encourage you to go back and watch that.
Yeah, you'll be able to pick the episode from the title too. It's in the title, something to do with environmental something or other. So okay, so basically Bitcoin's amazing. With I wanted to ask a question about that power issue specifically. God, what was it? Oh, I wanted to make the observation actually, and this is so I kind of quest to try to make information as digestible as possible, like try and package it in small. It's something that I do as a Southerner, right? To be like, that's raining cats and dogs, right? I like to package stuff in cool phrases and things like that. And it's interesting to me what you're saying about the Texas grid because Bitcoin's actually providing not only stability but also liquidity to the power grid, which is actually the exact same thing that it does to finance, right?
Yeah.
Because the scarcity, 21 million Bitcoin only 21 Bitcoin million. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I was
You got it
stuck in
right
the
the first
matrix
time, I
there.
think.
Only 21 million Bitcoin ever provides stability and scarcity, and then being able to use like Lightning Network and Layer 2 chains, just like we're talking about for scalability, also provides liquidity. And cool companies like Bitflow are also working on some DeFi tech to actually, they're building the infrastructure that will be able to provide liquidity based on the Bitcoin blockchain in the future. The infrastructure is not quite there yet, but it took 75 years to build the interstates in the U.S. Like we'll be fine.
Yeah.
We have not been doing this for 75 years. We're still very, very early to John's earlier point. So, okay, for environmental concerns, we're not really worried about because of the fact that that's all a lie. Okay, cool. Well, I think that really adds up to a very positive future for not only blockchain technology, but also for society and the individual human being in the future as well, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. I think And my final word to anybody listening is that in the next year, especially like on the global stage, there's going to be lots of conversation about the way the pandemic was handled and which politician is set to do the best job and like which global leaders are going to rise up and provide all these solutions. But you as a human have a responsibility to think if you want, like, which way Western man, right? Like, it's not even Western anymore. It's which way human. Do we want to continue to follow these janked up politicians that suicide people who stand up to them? Or do we want to explore freedom systems that allow us to have freedom that we haven't really ever had, except for maybe the Wild West days of when we were transacting with barter and like actual raw silver or something like that, you know? So it's up to you to do your research. It's up to you to make these hard decisions. It's up to you to take responsibility for your own money. And there's lots of people here that can help you learn and make those decisions wisely. That's why we're here. We just want to present the information and make it easier for people to make these decisions. But it's still your decision at the end of the day. And the sooner that everyone owns up to that, the sooner we're going to have the economy and the society that we all want.
Yeah, I completely agree, dude. Tear in the eye. Eyes are welling. So, all right.
I mean, I feel like that was a pretty banging episode.
Yeah. I think that this is the perfect time to wrap up. We love you all. Follow everybody on Twitter. We use our handles in the description, so just look at the names. You'll be able to figure it out. Oh, and it also says hosted by @PurposeWay22 and @StylePigeon, so that's easy enough. Give @BitcoinLive a follow or a subscribe on YouTube and do all of that stuff as well. You know what helps the algorithm. Share the video. We would really appreciate it. We want to get this word out to more people so that we can continue to have an optimistic future. We love you all, and I reckon that's a wrap, y'all.
That's a wrap, y'all. Happy Sunday. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Peace.